Hey guys, welcome back to another epic episode of Talkin' Far, Far Away from the BrickCityBlockade.com podcast network. And sitting across from me, we've wanted to have him on one of the shows at some point. It's Mr. Eric Onkenhout. Eric, how is it going this evening, my friend? And thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's going really well. Yeah, it's pretty cool to be here.
Eric has been somebody that I've talked Star Wars with a little bit here and there, and
Yeah.
we've talked. You guys see him on Twitter all the time, and I have to admit, Eric, I love those videos that you put up of yourself. Like, hey guys, this is who I am. Like
Oh,
outside of Coffee with Kenobi and everything, those
I was
videos were pretty cool.
I was so nervous. I'm like, because like I know people see me post things, but I don't think anybody really knows who I am. So I'm like,
Right.
they don't like see my face. Well, they see the picture, but they don't know what I sound like. They don't hear my
Right.
voice. So I'm like, I'm just gonna post this video just because I'm really bad at like introducing myself to people in real life. So
Right.
I'm just like, I'm just gonna do this.
No, that's perfect. And it
Yeah,
was a nice little introduction to you on social media because it's like, hey guys, of course, you see my stuff. Guess what? This is the face that goes with it. And here's some
exactly.
your Star Wars art and everything. I mean, you're like, here's some stuff before I go to bed that you guys get to check out too. And
Yeah,
I have to have a lot of appreciation here at the network. We have so many people here who love collecting Star Wars art.
yeah.
It's great to see that.
It's awesome because I have a lot of friends that are really talented. I'm like, and I love collecting fan art, and I have a lot of it in my room, and I just kind of wanted to show it off. So, it's pretty cool.
That's the way to do it. Let the fans know what's going on. Now, Eric, let's dig deep into your Star Wars fandom. Let's start with day one, that day when you discovered Star Wars. What was that day like for you?
Um, you know, it's kind of hard to answer because it's been a part of my life for what seems to be my entire life. I
Yeah.
think I got into it at some point between Empire and Jedi.
Mm.
Um, I remember I remember just my mom buying me the action figures um, before I actually saw any of the movies. So I saw Jedi when it came out reluctantly. And, at that point, I had already kind of like had some of the figures and I would kind of like just kind of make up my own stories because I didn't really know who was who, or I knew who was who, but I didn't know like the plot points. Like I didn't know the relationship between Vader and Luke.
Mm.
So yeah, I just remember getting the toys when I was a kid, like for Christmas or my birthday, or just me being a pain, and then that kid like asking for toys all the time. So yeah, and then I saw Jedi because my sister at the time and her boyfriend saw Jedi, and then they told me kind of about what happened with Vader taking his mask off, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to see it now because I'm scary.
Yeah. Right.
That was like um almost 8 years. I was a few months shy of 8 years old.
Mm.
So I went and I just started wearing glasses too. So I went and then anytime Vader came on the screen, I would like take my glasses off and look down because I didn't want to see him. And then when it happened, I was like, oh, that's not too bad. So yeah. So I remember I think after I saw Jedi, my fandom really took off. Like I remember getting like the B-wing fighter for Christmas, and I had a
Mm.
friend that lived a few houses down from me. We would play Star Wars all the time. I think he grew out of it. I didn't. Yeah. And he was actually a couple years younger than I was too.
Right.
So yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's pretty
So
cool. So you were able to stick to it most of your life here. Obviously, it sounds like
yeah,
it's stuck to you very well.
yeah. Even like during the late '80s, where it kind of like died out, and I put a lot of my stuff away in the attic, but I kept it, but I
Yeah.
just didn't use it. I didn't look at it. I would take it down every now and then and kind of like look at it when I was maybe in my early teens, and be like, "Oh, that's cool. I remember that," and then I put it away,
Yeah.
you know. And then Heir to the Empire came out, and it's been snowballing ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how far we've come. We just came from a panel at Nashville Comic Fest today, and it's amazing when we're talking with the fans, Eric. It's like 40 years of Star Wars this year
Yeah,
exactly. There's just so much to reflect on in terms of our fandom, so many stories that we can share with
yeah,
not just our family, but our friends and people on these podcast networks and everybody from a galaxy far, far away. We're all part of this one community. It's amazing. Like you said,
Yeah.
you put the stuff away, even for the slightest moments, you go back to it. It's like, wow, I do remember that time.
Yeah. Like good memories. Like, oh, this is like really nostalgic stuff. And then, like I said, Heir to the Empire came out, and then I discovered comic books, and pretty much at the same time, I discovered a comic book store near where I live.
Mm.
So those three things happened at right around the same time, and I would say maybe 91, 92, and then it just kind of like exploded from there. The prequels came out later on, and the special editions, and it's been like insanity ever since.
Yeah,
In the good way.
realistically, it really has been. It really
Yeah.
has been. There's just been so much of it, and I do totally agree with you. Scott Inch also is on this show talking far, far away, and every week we always talk about the comics, and it's amazing what the canonized comics can do. And technically, even when we're talking about the Knights of the Old Republic comics, the
Yeah.
early Dark Horse comics, those had some really great stories. Which specific comic did you get into, Eric?
The first one I picked up, I specifically remember this because I was at Newberry Comics with my
Mm.
brother, and I saw a classic Star Wars #1, which I think was a reprint
Wow.
of like the Archie Goodwin comics from like the 80s. I think
Mhm.
there might have been in like the newspaper strips, but it was reprinted in comic form.
Mm.
And I remember picking it up, and I was flipping through it, and I'm like, I wasn't really interested. And then we came back at some point later on, and it was still there, and I bought it. And I, pretty much bought that whole run. It was like 20 issues. And then I got into the second printing of like the Dark Empire comics,
Mhm.
and those are really cool. I remember bringing one on the school bus with me one morning, and I remember some kid asking me like, "Oh, why does Princess Leia dress like a Jedi Knight?" And I'm just like, "This is cool." Stuff like that. I just remember, you know.
It's such a great story.
Yeah.
It's like it's like even at that age, Eric, people
Yeah.
are coming to you to ask questions about Star Wars.
Oh
And
yeah.
I feel like we've all been in that place in our lives where it's like, wow, this kid knows his Star Wars. I'm gonna go to him if I got a question about it.
Yeah, and speaking of that too, I remember in the same time period, some kid would ask me like, "Oh, who's the actor that played Chewbacca?" And I'd be like, "Peter Mayhew." And nobody else has ever heard of Peter Mayhew but me.
Right.
So it's just stuff like that.
And that's the
So
stuff that
yeah,
those people won't forget either. Like later on down the road, I know I have friends throughout high school and stuff that come to me as well, and they say, "Man, Robin, you were always that Star Wars guy. I always had questions for you and everything." And that's kind of cool because
yeah.
look at how that's translated into our lives, Eric. I mean, it's
I
amazing. It really
it's
is.
it's pretty much become my entire life. Even now at work, people will come up to me and be like, "Oh, I saw the new Star Wars movie. What did you think of it?" And I'd be like, "I loved it, of course. What did you think?" You know?
Yeah, for
So
sure, for sure.
yeah.
Now, one of the other things we always like to ask our guests on here is that, of course, we got into the comic books, we got into your Star Wars story. Now, Eric, if you were to choose a specific character from the Star Wars universe, and listen, it doesn't have to be canon, it can also be legends as well. Who would that character be and why?
Um, you know,
It's a tough one.
yeah, because my favorite character has always been Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I've always like wanted to be a Jedi, and I'm like, oh, it's so cool. I'm like gonna be serious and be a Jedi and all this stuff, and then, then the prequels came out, and I thought I liked Empire Yoda better just because he was more wise. I thought anyway,
Mm.
and then Obi-Wan. I'm thinking, okay, maybe Obi-Wan because he was kind of like that kind of like a secondary character you played with as a kid, but after the prequels and Clone Wars, he was like pretty cool.
Mm.
And then I think of Luke, and I know a lot of people think he's kind of whiny, but honestly, like Luke is all of us. We grow up, we have to do things we don't want to do. We're afraid to do things we have to do, but we do it because that's the cycle of life, and you become wiser in the end. So, um, I'm gonna say Luke. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
Eric, I think you just came up. I think you just came up with probably one of the best hashtags ever. Hashtag everyone is Luke.
Yeah. I
I
think so.
love that line because it's so true.
Yeah. It's weird because I never really had any desire to be Han Solo. I thought he was cool. You know, I thought he was cool, and Lando's cool, but those were like I would have friends like them, but I was never like that. I can never be that relaxed and cool. I'm just like I'm always like kind of like jittery, nervous. But yeah, I don't know. I like Luke because he's like the man, I guess. You know.
Yeah,
He's I mean basically even though this new trilogy is about Rey and Finn and Poe, I mean the whole thing about the Force Awakens was the fact that Luke has vanished. So
yeah.
everything is focused on him. So
That's
yeah.
true. There's just so much that we have to decipher with Luke. Of course, when it comes to canon stuff, we're going to be seeing a Luke novel coming just before we get into the Last Jedi and everything, and it's great because we had that announcement at San Diego Comic-Con, which is happening this weekend.
Yeah.
And it's great that we're getting some more backstory because Scott Inch and I have talked about it here on the show, and we talk about it here on the network all the time. And I think everybody's been talking about it, articles and fan discussions, that Luke's story between, I mean, we can even say between Return of the Jedi and up to The Force Awakens and now into The Last Jedi, there's a lot of gaps that have to be filled there canon wise. And there are
Yeah.
a lot of great stories, I feel, that we have not even dug into yet. Listen, when they announced the Porgs, I mean, I want to know what Luke was doing with Porgs. We had somebody comment that maybe Luke was getting a little chunky because he was eating the Porgs. I think that's a
Oh
terrible,
man.
but at the same time,
Tastes like
Eric,
chicken.
great comment. I'm saving that one. But I think that there's so many great little pieces in here, Eric. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Do you want to see more of Luke's story in between this timeline?
Yeah. I think we kind of have to. I think we want to know what happened. What's he been doing the whole time? What happened with him in Ben Solo? I mean,
Mm,
uh, there's like 30 years of story that happened. That's the largest gap between any two movies in the saga. That's a lot of activity,
yeah, there's
you know.
just yeah, and the thing is too, it's like fans want these answers now. I feel
Yeah,
like fans really want to get to this before the Last Jedi comes around, and maybe personally, I think this Luke novel, whatever it is, like it's obviously around the same line as the Leia and the Phasma one, just leading up to what has happened, uh, leading up to the Last Jedi, naturally. But
yeah,
I think that we are going to get some answers, and I think that even after the Last Jedi, it's like now we can start filling in the gaps here as
yeah.
we keep going. It's going to be nice to see how it works going forward, Eric.
So, so this new Luke book. I mean, I don't know a ton about it. So, is it solely about the time between Jedi and the Force Awakens, or is it? I think is it going to be like a time jump?
Yeah, I believe from what it sounds like report wise is that there will be some kind of time jump, and that had me a little concerned at first because I was like, with Luke, we don't really need a time jump necessarily. It's like we kind of have to start filling in these gaps pretty quickly in
Yeah,
terms of his story. It matters how much of a time gap it is, honestly. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Eric, but I think like if we're talking about 1 to 2 years, yeah, that's fine. But if you're suddenly going to jump, if there's this 30-year gap and you're going to jump like a full 15 to 20 years, it's like, whoa, wait a
yeah,
second. Hold on, take a back seat for a second. What happened now in between that? Because they're going to have to explain it.
yeah. Because the only stuff we have about Luke after Jedi is the Shattered Empire comic.
Yeah,
Um, so I'm thinking, I don't. I mean, I have no idea, but I'm assuming that the story is gonna probably there's gonna be some event between him and like Uncle Owen or something,
mm,
and then I'm thinking it's got to be something at some point between Empire and Jedi,
yeah,
and I'm hoping that we'll get something that's gonna take up most of the 30 years before Force Awakens.
yeah.
So, but it's a young adult book, so I don't know how thick it's gonna be and how much information is gonna be in it.
That's a
I
really
mean,
good point.
yeah,
And I
So
think we're going to see some of that with the Leia one, and I think we're definitely going to see. I mean, Phasma is different because I think that there's just more of an origin story to tell there, especially how Gwendolyn Christie was used very little in the Force
yeah,
Awakens, and maybe only made an appearance in the Journey to the Force Awakens stuff. I think Eric completely. There does have to be some storytelling about how Phasma came about with the First Order and everything, and it's going to be really interesting to see come this novel time what's going to happen because, as you know, Eric, there's going to be a lot of reading to do this fall.
yeah. Plus, there's a comic series of her coming out too.
Yeah.
So, which I guess is basically she gets out of the trash compactor, takes a shower, um, and then puts a suit back on, go tries to find Finn or something. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
don't know. Like, I guess this book is closer to the Last Jedi than the comic. I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. It sounds like they're not really wasting any time with that. It's like, listen, we're gonna give you Phasma's backstory in a comic, and then we're gonna throw it the rest of it to you in this book. And it
Yeah,
sounds like that makes a lot of sense because of course we don't know much about her, so it's easy for them to do that. When you're talking about Luke, there is so much about him. He is such a popular character. Just because Phasma sold thousands of action figures on Force Friday
yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean, that we can just kind of, you know, get the quick story. No, they're doing a good job of spreading that out and giving it to us. And I have to admit, Eric, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I think Star Wars has done a very good job in Del Rey books and Pablo Hidalgo and Dave Filoni to a certain extent of making sure that these stories are being told.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I tell my friends like I get almost as excited for the books as I do for the movies because I love to read anyway. So I love reading Star Wars novels. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's that?
No, no, you're absolutely right. There is a certain amount of hype that does come with these books. I think as Star Wars fans, of course, there are the people out there who don't necessarily read the novelizations and
Yeah,
they don't really get into it. Like with Rogue One Catalyst, I even told my friends it's like, wow, when you read Catalyst and then you go and see Rogue One, it totally changes the feeling at the beginning of that film when you see, of course, Jin,
yeah.
um, and you see Galen, and then of course you see
Lyra.
Lyra, and you
Yeah,
just see that interaction. It's like, wow, what backstory to have. And I think the Last Jedi novel, I mean, I know it comes out after the film comes out, but at the same time, the Force Awakens novel did some real justice for that film after it came out.
yeah. I it's I see. A lot of my friends they kind of feel like I shouldn't have to read the novel or another novel to get the backstory in the film, but it's like you said, I love getting like a little bits of like conversation or scenes in the book, and then from that you get a scene in the movie, and you're like kind of like, oh, what does he mean by that? And then you think back to a scene in the book where it's like, well, you know, Galen and Krennic were used to be buddies, and now they're kind of like they hate each other. So
Yeah,
it just adds to the story, and that's what I really like. That's what it's all about for me.
yeah, it should add an extra level to the cinematic experience,
Yeah,
and I think all these great authors are doing a great job of conveying that message, getting the characterizations and the plot lines, and just adding extra levels to each aspect of these books. Eric, one of the last things I want to talk to you about is that Dave Filoni. I have to admit, this guy is on a tear right now. He has been releasing some great backstory about Ahsoka. It seems like over the last couple months, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I know we talked about it before going on air here because he's releasing these little tidbits here and there. And I want to talk first, before we get to the main one, about this interaction. And let me say, the illustrations he's done to go with him have been fantastic. He is such a model of Star Wars. He is what Star Wars
yeah,
has to be going forward for the
he
fans.
really gets it.
He really does get it. And it's the interaction between Ahsoka and the Bendu. And you were joking with me ahead. We're like, Dave, is this canonized? Like, wait a second.
I mean, like, why not? Why put it out if you're I know he likes to screw with us. I
Oh yeah,
understand that. But why put it out besides that, unless there's some meaning behind it
yeah,
or there's some kind of truth, and maybe he couldn't fit it into an episode or it wasn't right. Because I know how he's like, we got to stick to the story. We can't just put this stuff in because we like it.
right.
So, so I'm wondering if like he, if it is canon, I don't know, man. I mean, it kind of makes me wonder. I'm like, is it canon? It's probably not, but it would kind of make sense for it to be canon. I wouldn't be surprised,
Yeah,
honestly.
it would make so much sense. I mean, we talk about Rebels this past season. We've talked about it here on Rebels Recap on the network. Brian Fontaine, Scott, and I. It's like we almost wonder. The Bendu was such, and let me say, Tom Baker voicing him, a doctor,
Yeah,
one of the doctors voicing the Bendu. Please sign me up any day of the week. But at the same time, it's like this guy has such a bevy of knowledge. Ahsoka is another one who has such a bevy of knowledge. It would make sense that they would have had interaction. And when you see the Bendu interact with Kanan, now that we've gotten this other snippet, it makes a lot of sense that Ahsoka would have talked to the Bendu because of course, we're going to get into it, Ahsoka's interaction with Kanan and
yeah,
how connected she is to him. Eric, curious to hear your thoughts on that because I think there's a lot more to the Bendu and Ahsoka in terms of that interaction.
yeah. I mean, the Bendu to me still feels like he's some kind of he's like not real. He's not really there, and
Yeah,
I just I mean, he's to me he's above Yoda. He's above Qui-Gon and all them. So
yeah,
I mean, he's on that planet. I don't even remember the name of the planet, but he's on that planet
yeah.
for Kanan, I think. I just think Filoni didn't put it in there because he thought if they put it in there, then there's no speculation. He'll take the fun right out of it, and
Right.
then we'll know that Ahsoka is still alive.
Yeah, exactly. And
So
that's been his biggest secret. That's
yeah,
been his biggest secret is we don't want that answer question, that question answered necessarily. We get the wolf, we get all this other stuff, and it's like, Dave, just please tell us what's going on. And he's like, nope, you
no.
guys have to play it out. You guys have to have this discussion,
Well,
which is
apparently she's not the wolf, right? You saw that little
yep.
illustration where it says Ahsoka, the owl, not the wolf, not Ahsoka, when he points at the wolf. So it's like,
Oh, it's
dude,
great.
yeah, he's awesome.
So let me read the excerpt that Dave Filoni recently, just yesterday, it was released. This interaction between Ahsoka and Kanan, and I'm going to read it to the fans because there's some out there. We were talking about it today at the con that haven't heard this or read this yet. So I'm going to read it to our fans quickly. Um, Dave Filoni says, "Happy Friday, everyone. Since you seem to enjoy these drawings I've been doing, specifically, most likely the Bendu one, I've been doing here. Here's another tale left untold. Till now, that is. Till now, that is. That's Dave Filoni's style right there.
Yeah,
If you ever wondered if Kanan and Ahsoka knew each other or had met while they were younglings at the Jedi Temple, the answer is yes, all capitalized. They had met me, or they had met, though they did not know each other well. They had at least done some saber training together. Years later, when she met Kanan, Ahsoka needed to know how prepared he was for the conflict ahead. Here's a small piece of that scene, and perhaps a realization that in many ways Ahsoka was a mentor to Kanan. That is fascinating to me, Eric.
yeah,
Yeah, because it means to me that again, like you just said, and you said it beautifully, Dave Filoni doesn't necessarily want to put these things in Rebels or in an animated series. He
yeah,
wants us to continue to have that discussion and speculate. And he says it right there. He says it right there. It's like, you know, you seem to enjoy these drawings that I've been doing. And here's another tale left untold till now, that is. He's telling them outside of the traditional form that he is.
yeah, yeah. He's a big fan of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Tolkien, and I'm pretty sure. I mean, I've never read those books actually,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that there's a book out there that he's read called The Letters of Tolkien or something like that,
Mm.
which is basically like, I don't know if you ever heard of it, but
Yeah.
it's all like the kind of like things that were not in the story.
Yes.
And I kind of think that Filoni's doing the same thing, and there's going to be more of them.
Yeah.
So yeah,
He's trying to do what Tolkien did basically with, well, with everything that he worked on. He's trying to add a different level to the projects that he's working on. He's trying to add another level to the universe, which is exactly as Star Wars fans what we want. So here's the specific interaction between Ahsoka and Kanan. Ahsoka says, even at a young age, you were gifted with a lightsaber, but without training and discipline, those skills fade. And this is Ahsoka to Kanan. So Kanan says, so it seems. And Kanan gets up again, but he's a bit dispirited from this. Kanan continues on and says, I haven't had to fight with my lightsaber very often. For a while, I chose not to. I was, and then he doesn't say anything. And Ahsoka says, you were afraid to use it. I understand. Great little reference there to her attitude in the Clone Wars, because we saw that with Ahsoka. She wanted to back herself away from the traditional Jedi ways and really wanted to remove herself from the Jedi Order. So she kind of hints at that, it seems like. And then Kanan appreciates those words. And then Kanan says, I've been teaching Ezra as best as I can. I want him to be the Jedi I'm not. The, the Jedi that I'm not, that I couldn't be. And Ahsoka says, and I want you to be the Jedi that you are. This is where we see Kanan struggling with who his identity is. Who is Kanan? He still is struggling that. And I think Rebels, Eric, kind of showed us that Kanan, even though he's blind now, is still struggling with where is my place here as a master to Ezra and somebody who's training him.
yeah. I kind of take it as like a deleted scene.
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know, it's kind of like, oh, it's cool to see, but I don't really take it as. I guess I don't take it as canon, but I really kind of want to.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I kind of think. I mean, age wise, Ahsoka is older than Kanan, right? So
Yeah.
maybe someday we'll see like that in comic form, where like we see Ahsoka and Kanan training together. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back now when Ahsoka made her first appearance on Rebels. Kanan didn't act like he knew her, did he? I don't remember.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. When Kanan first interacted with Ahsoka, there wasn't much interaction at all. It was more of just a look upon each other of
Yeah,
familiarity. And that's kind of the sense that I get here. It's like they were never necessarily friends in a sense,
yeah,
but the Force connected them. The Force had, you know what I mean? As we always know, the Force binds and things together and creates this outright universe of the Force itself. And I feel that Kanan and Ahsoka in Rebels, like you said, that specific interaction, it was like there was a familiarity, but they didn't talk to each other really. It was kind of like, hey, it's like we're one in the Force together, but we both have these very different journeys we have to go down.
yeah, totally. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
I had to get my phone charger. My phone is yelling at me, like, give me some food.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, no, I don't know. I try not to overthink these things too much
Yeah,
because it is kind of like an illustration. So I'm kind of like, eh, but
right.
it's it's pretty cool anyway, just to see it because anything Dave wants to give us, I'll take it.
Yeah, it's true. It's a gift to us each time when Filoni's able to
Yeah,
share some stuff with us. And of course, being the last season of Rebels, who knows what he's going to throw at us? Are we going to see this style in the last season of Rebels, like a Tolkien style? I mean, it's kind of seems like that. It seems like we're going to see a lot of hardships this season, Eric.
yeah, totally. I mean, I was at I don't know if you were at Celebration.
Oh,
I was there. It was my first one, and I was in the panel for the Rebels.
right.
And when he's kind of stood up and started talking about, I have an announcement to make, and I'm like, oh no, he's leaving Lucasfilm.
Yeah, that's the scary one.
Yeah, the final season of Rebels, and I'm like, yeah, we all kind of expected that to come.
Hmm.
But have you watched Forces of Destiny?
Yeah, I've seen we've seen some episodes here at the network. We've discussed them on a couple of occasions. Interesting little tidbits, especially the Ahsoka one. I find that one quite interesting.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite one. The one with her and Padme, I think, is my
Yeah.
favorite.
Yeah, it's funny how those prequel stories actually end up being some of the best ones in Forces of Destiny. You know, whether it's Jyn Erso, of course, or whether it's Ahsoka.
Yeah,
There's some interesting little tidbits that they throw at us there. It's really cool at the same time that Star Wars is able to give us the this kind of content, whether it's short 3 minute clips or whether it's a 400 and something page novel. They're going to throw it at us for us to decipher and to break down and do exactly what you and I are doing right now, Eric, is to have a discussion about it.
yeah, and it kind of makes me wonder why why there's so much content in the prequel era. And there's a lot in the classic original trilogy era too, but only between episode 4 and 5.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering because of the way the prequels were kind of like a lot of people didn't like them,
Yep.
and I think maybe the people that are making some of the Clone Wars Rebels and things like that in the comics also are they saw that there's maybe some room to fill as far as character development. Maybe
Mm.
that's why there's so much content for the that era. But
Yeah. Yeah, there's just so many, and I say this all the time, and I'm sure you can agree with this, Eric. There's just so many gaps. No matter how much Star Wars they give us, there are gaps that they still have to fill, whether it is 1 year of stuff or whether it is 30 years of stuff. There is
yeah,
so much. We want our canon timeline to be filled from top to bottom. We just want a full glass of content that we can go back and say, yep, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened.
yeah,
And whether we see that extend into Old Republic at some point and we go even farther back, who knows? I would love to see it because I think it would expand this timeline finally. I don't know what your thoughts
I
on the Old Republic are, but
I I loved that game. I mean,
yeah.
Knights of the Republic was like that was my jam. I mean, you know, I think at some point they're gonna go back either at that time period or they're gonna go way in the future like they did with the comics and start filling in gaps on the end. Because like you said, there's so much space to fill and they're only kind of concentrating on like maybe 60 years worth.
Mm,
And it's like, okay, not everything happened at the same time. You
yeah.
can branch out, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. There's so much that we have to fill in. And I think as time goes on here, Eric, I think we're gonna start to see some of those gaps fill in. And hopefully people like Filoni are the ones that are gonna be able to help us fill in those gaps as we move on here.
Yeah. I
Eric, yeah,
I would love to see him do a live action movie or some kind of
yeah,
Netflix series or something. He's just too good.
yeah. We can't lose
Yeah.
Filoni, that's for sure. He is such an important piece to this galaxy far, far away. And I think we can all say it as Star Wars fans, Eric, that Filoni is crucial to the success of Star Wars in some way because he's one of the best elements they have, maybe other than some of these other directors that they're bringing in to do these films and the authors, of course. But Filoni is he's kind of becoming the heartbeat for me of some of this stuff because he's just so creative and so talented when it comes to this.
Yeah. I'm, I mean, he basically worked directly with Lucas for like 10 years. So, I mean, you
Yeah.
can't learn from anybody better than that right now. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. The creator
yeah,
himself, the father of Star
exactly.
Wars himself. Awesome. Eric, it's been such a great conversation. We are at the time of the show. It's a little thing we like to call plug time.
Okay.
And this is where we can talk about where the good people can find you across social media and where also they can find some of the works that you are doing across social media and online as well.
Oh, yeah. Cool. So, you can find me on Twitter at Eric Onkenhout. It's Onkenhout. I'm on Facebook, same name. I'm on Instagram under the same name, I think. I write monthly for Coffee with Kenobi. I just started doing weekly comic reviews for Big Shiny Robot. Um, and I write occasionally for the Beta Trio.
Very cool.
It's every month, sometimes it's every other month, kind of whenever I think of something to write about. Um, and I've actually been in talks with Joe Tavato, RetroZap, about writing something for him, but I just haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to write because that's kind of like what I do.
That is the best way to get your voice out there and
Yeah,
to get just anything you want to talk about when it comes to Star Wars out there. We love the people over at RetroZap. We love Joe, Chris, the
yeah,
entire network over there here from the Brick City Blockade Podcast Network. And we love supporting anything happening in a galaxy far away. You guys can follow me over on Twitter at Mr. Vote Tweets. Make sure to head on over to Instagram. Follow me at the official vote. Please head on over to iTunes, subscribe, rate, and comment for the Brick City Blockade Podcast Network. Tons of different shows like Talkin Far Away here available on iTunes. Head on over to brickcityblockade.com for everything happening in a galaxy far away. Eric, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show. And as we always say here at the Podcast Network, may the force be with you. Always.
of course. Awesome.